Okay, take it away, Eric.
Thank you so much, Sandy. Thank you so much for the invitation to join this talk with the Palo Verde group. And it's a pleasure to be here. I'm so excited to share with you some of the latest happenings at the border. And as you can imagine, there is no such a thing as a dull moment at the border. There's always a lot of different things happening. So I got a presentation to share with you and some pictures, and so you get a better idea some of the things that are currently happening. So first of all, let me introduce myself, and thank you for the introduction. I just want to add that my name is Eric Mesa. Use he, him, L pronouns. I am actually right now I'm not located in Tucson, Arizona. Right now I'm located in Guaymas, Sonora. It's a small little town by the Sea of Cortez where I'm from, visiting my parents today. And these are the ancestral and occupied lands of the Comcac and the Yoeme people, and many tribes that might have called this place home. But my work that I do is based from Tucson, Arizona as well. And I go back and forth across the border. I actually been crossing this border since I can remember. I had the privilege since I was a little kid to be able to come back and forth. Since the day I remember when my mom used to cross me, just hold my hand and just hurry up. We'll go and do some shopping in Nogales and then just go back. So things have been changing a lot in the last 35 years for sure. So that's a little bit about me. And one thing I want to share with you all is that just to put into perspective, you know, because I am not sure where you are located right now, but my guess is some of you come from Arizona, maybe some other states. Maybe you live directly on a border town, or maybe you are not so far away. But if you don't live directly on a border town, usually the first things that come to your mind when you start thinking about the border, and I ask this question a lot when I meet with groups and people, so I can kind of like gauge the perspective of what's people thinking about these border towns, you know. And I won't lie, you know, a lot of the response that I get from people usually tends to be really negative. You hear things like, well, like drugs or violence or the segregation, separation, murder, people dying, and it just goes on and on into this negative pattern. You know, that's the perspective when we think about the border. And if you take a look at the picture, I just did a Google search on put US-Mexico border, and what you see, the narrative of our border towns that you see on those pictures is pretty much what people is always hearing about the border. And I'm guessing if you're not located on a border town directly, it tends to be the perspective. You know, when you hear about the news of a border town, of something happening there, it tends to be leaning more into the negative side. So, and it's very interesting. Let me tell you that when you ask somebody from the border that lives there, their answers change a little bit. It tends to be something like, well, family, culture, the desert, because they get to experience the border in a different way. The border is this place that, I'm not gonna lie, a lot of the things that you see here do happen. But there is also a lot of positive things happening. And those are some of the things that we need to also, I feel, continue to promote and also encourage, so that way the narrative from our border towns will start changing, because there are also really beautiful places along the border towns. So, and just to also kind of like go back in time, when you look at this image that you see, this is a map from North America, and this map shows you how the territories used to be kind of like shared back in the day by the tribes. When I ask people what's the difference that you observe, usually people say, well, there is no straight lines and there is overlaps. I like to see the border towns that this overlap, you know. When I used to cross to Nogales, there's like, oh, you feel almost like you're in Mexico, you know. There's a lot of Mexican people there. and people from all different countries overlapping in these areas of the border. And I just like to think about also how, this is a perspective, you know, or a way that things used to be done. Territories used to be shared. And I'm not gonna say that there was no conflict over territory back then, but one thing that is very important to mention is that the relationship to the land was completely different to the relationship that we have today. And that's what I wanna really focus on, the relationship that we have developed as a country to the land, and the ways that we have been treating the land at the border, and all of the environmental resources that we have here, and what has been happening lately. Because some of you are aware of this, but back in 2005, the US government signed what was called the Real ID Act. The Real ID Act had a specific section called the 102 section that allow the government to waive all the laws, pretty much all the laws. Any favorite law that you have that protects the environment was pretty much included on that waiver. And I'm talking about the Endangered Species Act, the Clean Water Act, Clean Air, Migratory Bird, and excuse the small letters here, but that was the only way I can actually fit all of these laws in one page. And the bottom one says 20 more. So just to give you a perspective, you know, that the borderlands is this place in this country that doesn't get the same protection that the rest of the country does. And this was because these laws were completely waived and they don't apply here, with the excuse of building, keeping us safe, you know, from terrorists, that this all came after 9/11. So what you see here, where the person is right against this type of fence, which is called Normandy barrier. This Normandy barrier is a vehicle barrier, right? So it didn't allow any vehicles to go through, but it did allow animals to go through and move through the place. When the Real ID came out, well, George Bush signed it and started building a new type of fence in the border. This is important to mention because Sierra Club has not been on this fight for just since Donald Trump, you know. It started in 2007, 2008, when these walls start coming, because one thing that you're gonna notice about the wall is didn't allow any of the wildlife that live in the Sonoran Desert or other places in the border to move freely like they have done for thousands of years. But it continued to allow people. You know, if you have a barrier like this, it is actually pretty easy for a human to go over, to cut through, to go under, to break through, any different ways that you can do it. But the animals, they didn't have the tools or the skills or like the way to jump over. So all of these migration corridors that exist in the Sonoran Desert, they stop thanks to that wall. So we have observed over and over again, there is, we're part of a larger coalition that has cameras, other environmental organizations that have been able to track with cameras a lot of the different animals that have been stopped, that haven't been able to cross from one side to the other. We know that these barriers are designed to stop humans but that also includes all of the wildlife that lives in these places, including the smallest mammals or amphibians, like you see a Sonoran Desert toad on the top, to even birds, javelinas, mule deers. And this is what you see more often at the border towns. You can see death of the wildlife, animals that depend on the resources on each side of the border now are not able to cross to find those resources, water holes that they depended on, feeding grounds that they use for millennia. Now they're being stuck on each side of the border. This is a mule deer. These are some pictures that we get to see that somebody was there on the right time at the right moment, but there's a lot of things that we don't get to see. We also have seen one of the biggest concerns are some of the endangered species that live on these areas, like the Sonoran Desert pronghorn, which population decimated after the construction of the wall. They live in the most remote place on the desert, and they have been highly impacted. The ocelot is the one that you see on your top right. And of course, the jaguar, one of the most emblematic species for conservation. Jaguar population, well, there have been a lot of sites because the southern part of Arizona is the northernmost in America territory for jaguar. Unfortunately, they had only been spotting male jaguars, which are the ones who do the largest treks, but they still haven't seen any females. So now with the construction of the wall, the chances that females someday will settle on our sky islands in Arizona are continued to go. The chances are continued to go down. Many more. We're talking about at least 92 different species of animals that have been documented that have been highly impacted by the wall. At least 9 are considered as species in endangered species. Well, this is a picture that gives you an idea of a timeline. You know, this was taken in about 1.5 years to 2 years at the most apart from one of each other. The one on the top, that was how the borderlands used to look like when the barrier, before the new design of Donald Trump wall went in. You can see definitely the decimation of a lot of vegetation, including some species like saguaros and trees. And now you start seeing lighting posts, which are, most of the creatures of the desert are nocturnal. So lighting right there on their habitat is definitely going to change their behavior. This is another one that gives you an idea of some of the impact. Look at the top, you can see some of the trees, some of the pristine desert, lots of saguaro. This is the same place right on the middle. It looks like a highway. And then there is the big wall and the post lights coming in on that side. This is the first one in 2019, and then it goes to 2021, just 2 years apart. The environmental impact on those areas is huge, as you can see it. There's one more here. Some of the saguaros are completely gone and a lot of the big trees as well. Well, I'm going to be also sharing a little video that gives you an idea also of some of the things that were happening that honestly, when you look at it, it just doesn't make any sense. Right here on the top of the mountain, this mountain is near Sasabe, Arizona. It just got blasted with dynamite right to the top of the mountain to bring that heavy machinery to build a wall that never existed there because it was already a natural barrier. There is a super steep hill that goes down that right now, after they build a wall right next to it, the erosion problems are increasing and increasing. You can see it right here on the side. This is the year that they're building it. So now with the rains, all of that loose gravel and loose rock are going to start filling up all those canyons where the vegetation is. For no reason, because there is no wall on those places. It is such a natural barrier. If somebody can go up that mountain, it's a big accomplishment just to do that. Why would you do that if you can just go over the wall? Right here, it is a staging area, and this is where they were mixing the concrete to do the foundation of the border wall. Concrete and all this heavy machinery and all these new open roads on the desert cause a huge impact on compaction of the soils. Also, the groundwater has been heavily impacted by the extraction of the water to mix the concrete for the border wall. We're talking about tons and tons of, because the foundation of this new design of border wall is about 6 feet wide and 6 feet deep. To give you an idea of how much concrete was used on these 216 miles of new border wall that went in. This is a picture that shows you the impact of the water. You know, if you all live in Arizona or have been in Arizona, you know that we get the monsoon season. And when that comes, the water travels so fast through the desert, we call it flash floods. And this is what has done to the wall in the past already. So nature took care of it. Basically, they didn't plan for a gate, a storm gate, and took down the wall. This is the old design, but they put on the new design using basically the same concept, the big foundation and the big tall wall. That it is about, the new design of the wall was about, in some places, it's about 30 feet high with a steel plate on the top, which is what makes it different from this one, and the metal bollards. They did 30 feet high because they believe, after some studies, that that's when people start getting dizzy. So if you start climbing, you're more likely to fall to your death at that height. And the steel plate is to burn people's hands or cut them if they're trying to do that. But water has taken it down, and it will do it again if they don't open gates. Just look at the erosion that the flash flood caused on this area. It is pretty incredible what we have here in the desert. Now I'm going to move to what Sierra Club has been doing and advocating for what has been happening. For you all to have a better context, Sierra Club is being part of a lawsuit that we demanded to the government to do some remediation. I'm going to be sharing with you some of the things that we believe are important to address in order to have restoration happening in these places that are being heavily impacted by the wall. The slopes, as you can see, after 1 year, you can already start seeing a lot of erosion. Because when they created this very wide road, they push to the side what's called a berm. And this acts almost like an artificial watershed. So all the water just gets directed, gets stopped by this berm, and just moves fast to the bottom of the hill, causing a lot of erosion. And this is something that it will continue to happen. And what we're asking is that the stabilization of the slopes is not done by pouring a lot of concrete, because that's their proposal, to pour some concrete on these very steep hills. But what we have seen in some places after the concrete gets poured is that humidity and water goes underneath and ends up breaking it. And then we're gonna end up with areas in the middle of the desert covered with broken concrete that took a lot of resources and a lot of water to do in the first place. So we want them to do really higher hydrologies that are able to direct the water to some places instead of eliminate those berms and do it properly. We want also to eliminate or reduce the lighting. Desert animals, as I was saying, they are very, most of their behavior is nocturnal. So we are hoping that some of the light will go away, or at least change to what's called red lower temperature lighting. So it is a little bit less abrasive for the desert creatures. The staging areas are these massive areas that were completely clear by the construction crews to mix the concrete, like massive areas like you saw in the picture. And they need to be restored. And all of those materials that were left over in the middle of the desert, they need to be removed and be put to use somewhere else. So we are hoping that they will revegetate those areas and also use native seeds and monitor also invasive species of plants, because what happened when you have a lot of different construction crews coming in and out of the desert from other places, they carry with them also seeds. So we have seen already a lot of invasive species of plants in areas that never were before. And this is also fire danger. This unnecessary dynamite blasting on the mountain tops needs to be addressed and restored. So we also, if it doesn't happen, it will also lead to erosion and invasive species taking over. So it is, and this, what you see on that picture, it repeats all over the place in the border wall area. So Border Patrol has these practices that we are asking them to stop because they're completely unnecessary. What you see on the picture is what's called a tire drag. And it gets to they tie this to the back of the truck, and then they go around in the desert and do what's trying to erase footprints of migrants. So, but what it also is causing is a lot of destroying the topsoil of the desert. They go even in new areas sometimes and open new roads. And Border Patrol needs to be accountable and also needs to stop these practices because migrants are smart, you know, in order to avoid those, what they use is just a piece of carpet on the bottom of their shoe, and they don't leave any footprints in the first place. So why bother to do these practices that are super harmful for the environment and they don't really have any impact of what they're trying to do? So we also, like, some of these roads are huge. This is near Quito Vaquito area, and also El Camino del Diablo, which was this beautiful road where water used to move from one side to the other, what's called the sheet flow. And now when the new road came in, it's opening these berms to the side. And now the water that is coming from one side just fall inside of the road and it travels away and it doesn't make it to the other side. So it is a big problem. We also advocate that there is meaningful consultation with the tribes out of their sacred sites, because what you see on the picture, this is Monument Hill. So for you to get an idea, Monument Hill is one of the most sacred sites for the Tohono O'odham people, Hiasherotom. And this is not only a burial place, but it's a place where they buried their ancestors that were warriors. So they went through and put the dynamites right here on the burial grounds to build the wall. So I just want you to just digest that a little bit of how would you feel if your ancestors' burying sites were dynamite. We're also asking for removal of all the obstructions. There is gaps on the wall, a lot of different gaps, just like the one that you see on this picture. And it is completely blocked by these boulders, and because the construction crew just left them there. So when the water comes from Mexico and tries to cross to the United States, it's not able to do so anymore and just gets stopped there, causing a lot of problems because the plants that are on the other side that depended on this water coming from Mexico or vice versa, now they don't get it as they used to. So all that needs to be removed. We are also advocating for leaving these passages open. There is about 26 to 28, these kind of small gaps between Sasavi and Nogales, and just put the vehicle barrier there, and they can use technology. The technology exists to track people moving through. And hopefully leaving these gaps open will allow some migration to happen. So we are hoping that those gaps are left open. Unfortunately, the last thing that they say to us is that they will actually close all those gaps and they will be installing what they call cat holes, which is just a smaller version of that. They open 2 inches on each bollard on each side. So it makes it about 8 inches wide. So smaller animals can go through, but not big ones. So a mule deer or a javelina won't be able to make it through. So we are hoping that this will be changing. There is a lot of aquifers, well, there is not a lot, and that's the problem. There is just a very few areas where you can find water in the desert. And one of the most important ones is the one you see on the picture, Quito Vaquito Springs. When the wall went through that site, Organ Pipe National Park only got a 3 months notice to do the survey of the artifacts, because this is a sacred site for the Hiasherotom and O'odham people. And they were able to rescue over 5,000 artifacts just in a section of not like a quarter of a mile on the side of this spring. This spring is located right next to the wall. So now the spring got a lot of water, like the level of the spring went down because they were taking water from each side of it to mix the concrete. So there needs to be a better study about what's happening on those aquifers that have been impacted, and hopefully no further water will be taken for those construction. So those are some of the things that we are asking through the lawsuit to the government. Just to give you an update right now, things are moving really fast at this moment. We have a meeting with the Department of Justice and Department of Homeland Security. I believe it's going to be in June 16, where we're going to sit and talk to the Department of Interior, which is Fish and Wildlife, and all the people who actually knows about the species and the environment and have done the same recommendations that we're doing here, or very similar. And they will be, hopefully we'll get better results once the experts come into the talk, because when we talk just to Department of Homeland Security and Border Patrol, that's not their area of expertise. So for them, some of these concepts sound a little bit like, well, no, I think for us, the most important is that we do safe for Border Patrol. So for them, remediation at the beginning means like filling trenches, capping some rebar, or putting more lights so the agents are safer. But that is not really remediation. That's when we start talking about we need to do things that include the environment and the wildlife that lives around these areas that have been heavily impacted. So what has been happening is hopefully we'll get better results. Some of the good news that we had is because all of their answers to our petitions were really vague. Now we are getting some numbers. And I can share with you that there has been about 616 millions that have been allocated for remediation for this sections 208 and 2808. What that means is 284 is the sections that were the funding that build those sections of the wall came from a pot of money that is destined to stop drug trafficking, and 2808 is for military funding. So that's now those sections were stopped after Joe Biden came into president, and now the money that was left, now they're thinking about doing some remediation on those areas. Lots of stuff happening. Hopefully that's just a good start as we move forward and we can see some results, because what we're asking is that we get progress reports. So we need to see how things are going and if they're actually putting the money where it should be and they're actually doing remediation. Right around the border right now, Border Patrol and Department of Homeland Security. Some of you might be aware of this process, but they are asking and reaching out to the community so they can hear from the community what some of the best practices that they should be doing. They divided by El Tucson sector, Yuma, San Diego, which is where they are right now. Then it goes down to El Centro, and then it goes down to Texas. And it's open to the community to share your best practices recommendations for the remediation work. It's all on their website. You can participate and share with you that you're concerned about wildlife as well, and also about the environmental impact of the border wall. We need definitely more people to participate. As Sierra Club, as a Borderlands program, we also have very clear that we can continue to protect the wildlife and but we need to integrate the community that lives in the border towns and also the people that moves through this area. I believe that the border wall, it is the response to a poor immigration reform that we have in this country. I believe that it is a very medieval solution for a very complex and modern problem that we have. So we need to start thinking about how can we do better immigration reform, and as a Sierra Club, how can we support that? Because having those laws better in place, then we're going to have less problems at the borderlands, and hopefully people from the borderlands will be able to also find ways to find more sense of belonging to the borderlands and promote more sustainable development on these areas, and also transboundary conservation. The border has two sides. Is the United States side and the Mexico side on the other. And a lot of these, when we look at just the Sonoran Desert as the American side or the Mexican side, we are cutting it through, and this is not, you got to remember that overlap. You know, the animals don't know any borders. So we need to do some better collaboration with the amazing things that are happening on the Mexican side too. Support movement that is happening there, environmental movement that is happening, like Cuenca Los Ojos or other little moments that are happening in Mexico, and find better ways of collaboration. Right now, we're starting to do a program with Big Bend in Texas of how can we unite and enhance the collaboration between the Mexican side and the United States side. Canada and the United States have a similar thing. They call it the Peace Park. We would love to have a Peace Park here in the Mexican border too. And of course, we do a lot of public events. I think a lot of the things that are happening, just people don't really see it on the news. Through the news, you will find usually the most horrific things happening, but it's important also to share a little bit of the things that are happening, the things that we need to get involved to happen in a better way as well. So we have a volunteer training coming up. It's going to be a virtual and an in-person. We're thinking about July. So if you can sign up for our newsletter for the Borderlands, you can learn more about it. And it's going to be just a day volunteer training. So in the case that you would like to learn more about the border yourself, and how can you also be a spokesperson for the Borderlands as well, wherever you are in your community. And we're going to be doing that as well. We'd love to have you there. Once again, we talk about Border Patrol. We monitor the impacts you can see in the desert. Border Patrol is one of the most well-funded organizations of this country. And there is a lot of people that comes through the desert, and they are not from here. They don't know the community. They don't know the dynamics. And there is usually a lot of conflict, and that has been the direct cause of death of many people. And now we have, I think, Border Patrol, and this is not only something that I asked for, but indigenous tribes in particular have always been advocating that they need to have training that helps them don't have any bias or make them more sensitive to the communities that live in these areas. And of course, we are always tracking what some new laws are coming with the help of volunteers. We reach out to lawmakers. We do volunteer lobbying. We do letters, emails, and calls, and we encourage all of our volunteers to do so as well. And I want to ask you, Palo Verde group, what can you do about it? What would you like to do about it? That's your homework. Think about it. And because at the end, you know, the borderland, it is not all those bad things that you hear only, right? It is also this beautiful place where you can find the last, well, it was a binational bison herd that cross in New Mexico area. We got Big Bend. We got lots of, this is the Sonoran Desert is the most biodiverse desert in the world. And the borderlands, we have the Sky Islands that makes it just even the most incredible place. So I invite you also to experience it, come and see it for yourself if you haven't. Sierra Club, we do also outings, and we recently we did one. It was a bike ride along the border, so people can actually have a sense of what's happening there and see it with your own eyes and leave that militarization and that pressure that. But we do it in a way so people can actually reclaim those spaces, you know, that you are paying for also with your taxes. So I think it is important, but nobody has a voice there other than a border patrol, you know, but the community that lives in those places need to also have a voice, because it is also the place, the home of all the wildlife that we still have the opportunity to see on these places. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to see if I have any questions or if anybody has anything that you would like to add. I believe there is a couple things on the chat for me. Okay, why do they want lights along the wall? Well, I lost it, sorry. Carrie, yeah, Carrie, so the lights are for safety purposes, for border patrol agents, so they can actually see people when they're crossing. But it is kind of not the best idea, because they already have technology. They have these towers that are called IFTs, integrated fixed tower. It's technology that comes from Israel that they're able to see about 2 miles away, or even more, I believe, 2 to 7 miles is something like very impressive. And they also have like, they can read thermal images as well. So you can actually see people even in the dark. So I don't really know why is the purpose of all those lights other than for them to feel safer. But honestly, I don't feel like they discourage people from crossing. And they are only in just a few places, not all along the border right now. I hope that answered your question. Can rewilding take place even with the wall there? What will be long-term effects on the wall, or do we have to intervene to assist nature in surviving? You know? Thank you, Amy. Yeah, I think it has to happen even with the wall there for sure. I think, but in order to happen, we also need to have that better relationship with the people that has been done the most impact to it. So they, like Department of Homeland Security, as if the practices of opening new roads or like continue to build more infrastructure on pristine places, if those practices continue, then we're gonna, it's an uphill battle. So we need to, hopefully they start using more the technology and using the less of the infrastructure that, or like the cars driving around. You will not believe, like when we went on that bike ride, just on a half a mile of a section, we saw about 8 trucks going, 6 or 8 trucks just going back and forth, one next to each other. So it was like the amount of investment that you see there is, it feels a little bit unnecessary. So I do hope that those, the rewilding happen with the help and understanding of the people that is always doing that impact as well. The long-term effects of the wall, it is hard to say. Like, for example, when I was asking about what would be a good amount of money to ask for restoration of an endangered species habitat, you know, like, but how people can just throw a number, it's really hard decision to take, because you don't know what's going to be happening on the next couple of years. We are talking about habitats that are in both sides of the wall. So when the wall has gone through, we, as far as right now, these studies take usually 2, 3, 4, 5 to 10 years to really understand what's really happening. And I think we don't have enough time yet. So, but we have seen definitely a lot of negative impacts, like with the Sonoran desert pronghorn, the herd that moved through that wall has been losing a lot of members. We also have heard from this desert bighorn sheep in California and the Jucumba Mountains. Some of the area where they cross has been complete wall, and in an area where they use as a migration corridor, there is a chain link fence that was left there that is a complete hazard for them, as they can get stuck on the chain link fence that is all over the mountain there. So we're asking for them to remove that. Also, for example, the pygmy owls, the burrowing owls that live in California, they don't fly over 30 feet high. So we don't know what's going to happen with those populations either. With the jaguar, it has been very little sight, so we don't know. The herd of bison that you saw in the picture now is stuck on the United States side, so they don't go to the Mexican Chihuahuan desert anymore. So there is a lot of things that we don't know, but one thing is for sure is, like, when you cut through the habitat of a creature that has depended on that migration corridor, I believe, and I know that the impact is going to be very negative. Or do we have to intervene to assist nature in surviving in and around the wall? I think the intervention is to really remove that wall and nature will take care of itself. We're just, like, the intervention that we have done as humans is horrific. Yes, there is a link to the border community commenting that I was mentioning, Naomi, and I will, I think, let me see. Can the meetings with DHS, CBP take place with the premise that the wall is a failure to prevent human crossings? Does DHS have stats reported and supposed prevention? Well, that's a good question. Can the meetings with DHS, CBP, etc., take place with the premise that the wall is a failure to prevent human crossings? Well, they don't say it that way. They're too proud to say it, of course. But the numbers out in the desert haven't changed a bit. You know, I volunteer with No More Deaths organization, and then when I go to camp, it's always packed. So definitely the amount of people crossing, it hasn't changed that much. But they're definitely not going. That's when we say, like, we need to remove these sections of the wall. And even they know so, especially where there is gates for storm gates, we know that those need to be removed. But what they're saying is that they're going to have people that opens them up in the monsoon season so the water can move freely, and then close them back again when the monsoon season is over. But what's going to happen is the monsoon season is different in California that is here. So it's a lot of coordination. We have seen people already getting keys to open those gates, and this is people that moves humans through them. We heard stories all the time. So it is now those gates are welded shut. It's a lot of things happening the borders. So statistics that suppose the prevention of the human migrant to the wall, I think that if they have them, they don't really share those as much. I think for them to admit that the wall is not really stopping anybody I mean, we're talking about, I always ask this question at the end, you know, like, because to make a mile of a wall, we're talking about 24 to $34 million average to make a mile of a wall. So I like to ask this question, you know, what would you do with that money in case you have it, you know, instead of building a wall? There is a lot of money that went through. Of course, is one of my friend Miles from says that is the largest political campaign prop in history of the United States. We're talking about a wall that went in with the economical and political reasons behind it, and the ecological were really not taken into consideration. And that's where we are right now when we think about the reason of the wall. And we need to really work in figuring out ways that those waivers, rescind those waivers. So if Donald Trump, I hope not, comes back to presidency, he's just not able to continue to do what he was doing without protecting the environment. Yes, and when Donald Trump came into presidency, a lot of these laws were already waived, but he is also a businessman, and he waived more laws that allow them to contract people that he wanted to contract without doing the proper contracting laws. So a lot of the contracts for building the wall went to people that supported his campaign. So we need to just be aware. I know I only have 5 minutes, and I'm trying to look at the link to share with you, but I'm going to share a link that it is for our newsletter. If you don't get the newsletter in your email, we send a newsletter every month with the latest news of the border, ways that you can get involved. If you like to assist to a volunteer training or be part of one of our events, you'll be getting all that information. We also have social media. You can find some posts on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter under Sierra Club Borderlands. And we'll love to hear more from you as well. I'm also going to put my email. So in the case that you have any other further questions or clarifications, please feel free to reach out. I'm going to put that on the chat right now. This link I'm posting right now, it is the link to sign up for the newsletter. And that is my email right there. Thank you so much for inviting me for this talk. I'll let, if anybody else has any question, otherwise I'm going to let Sandy, if you have any other announcements or.
Well, thanks so much, Eric. Maybe everyone can use your clapping emojis or just clap. Appreciate you taking some time out of your trip to visit with your parents to talk to us and provide us with this good information, and just also appreciate all the great work that you're doing. I don't see any other questions, so I think we'll just thank you again, and hopefully folks will go ahead and sign up to get involved with the Borderlands program. There's a lot to do, and it really is an amazing part of our state and our country, and there's a lot to see, and a lot to protect. So anyway, encourage you to get involved and contact Eric. And if you have any trouble finding any of the information, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll make sure that we get you connected. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful afternoon.